Welcome back. This is Shah. Let's go and react to another It's Complicated channel video. This one's called Undercover Feminists. Also, special shout out to It's Demon. You're an absolute legend, mate. He reached out to me and was like, where's the videos at, man? It's been a while. So, making this one for you, It's Demon. Let's go and watch it together.
Can you define chivalry?
Okay, so my opinion of that is like opening doors, putting a woman first, like,
opening a door for me, buying me flowers, you know, just sweet stuff, the small stuff that's overlooked nowadays.
kind of old school tradition, just like the men watching out for that woman's needs, basically, like, not kind of like putting us as equals and whatnot, because in my opinion, we're not equals. So I would rather just kind of be, you know, taken care of, looked after, all that. But like at the same time, I can hold my own. But
see, that's the problem right there. She defines what she likes, you know, men to do as far as a chivalrous man goes. But then right after that, there's that qualifier statement of, but I can do it on my own, though. If you can do it on your own, then chivalry is kind of, you know, a moot point.
Is chivalry a choice or an expectation?
That's a good question.
Should be an expectation.
It's a choice.
in most,
I'd say it's a choice if you're a man, and typically it's an expectation if it's coming from women.
men, it's a choice, but I think it should be an expectation.
I define chivalry as selflessness and a mindset of servitude.
Okay, why would a man want to be chivalrous?
That's just a manly thing to do, and to be a gentleman.
Who defines that? Who says that that's what the man is supposed to do?
I don't know. My dad.
And my dad, but he's gone, so I don't know where it came from. No, it's just respect for women.
You know, and the thing about that is it comes from his dad, and his dad got it from his dad. But the defining change here is that the world, you know, the boy's grandfather grew up in and lived in and survived in is very different than it is now that we're now living in. You know, they're talking about a traditional standard essentially for men. And on the opposite side of that is the woman's traditional standard, which has been kind of blown to pieces in the modern, you know, day. So it's great if it worked for grandpa, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for men now.
Why do people think that chivalry is just about basic mutual respect as opposed to a one-way servitude towards women?
Probably because it sounds a little bit selfish to say that you have to have a chivalrous man, but then you're not wanting to serve him in other ways.
See, that's exactly right. It becomes a one-way servitude if the other side of that equation, the women, aren't doing their own version of, you know, ladylike behavior, which is supposed to be the complement to a chivalrous man. So if a man's just being chivalrous over here and the lady is not, you know, living to her traditional way, then it becomes one-way servitude.
Why do people believe that chivalry is dead when chivalry is still expected and practiced?
I believe that it is very hard to find, and so it feels like it's dead, but it should be still practiced, but it's far and few between.
I think women want to do whatever they want, but want men to treat them like with chivalry, but they're not treating their men that way, so they're like not being wise and acting as that to receive that kind of treatment.
Yeah, I think she spoke it pretty true there. I mean, that's exactly the entire root of the problem nowadays. And the question is, well, I think the easy answer is saying, okay, everybody act in your traditional way, but my opinion, Pandora's box has been opened, and we kind of have to move forward into whatever it's going to be that's new, because going back, unless you're planning to take away, you know, women's rights and all these kinds of things, which even if you took those away, they're probably not going to be happy about that. So I don't really think you can truly go back.
Why are men expected to be chivalrous to women they don't even know?
Just good manners.
If chivalry is just about being polite, why aren't women expected to do all those same things for men?
They should be held to the same standard.
Absolutely.
It's expected that the man opens the door and stuff like that, but the man expects a woman to keep the house clean, make dinner, take care of the kids. So that would be their way of providing chivalry.
Well, I mean, do women typically pay on the first date or take men out or, get down on one knee?
Because I think it's the man's job in general to be a protector and to be a provider. And in my opinion, I think a woman's role, and it doesn't have to be this way all the time because there's a lot of women in great positions that are powerful in the business world.
See, this is the qualifier statement. You know what I mean? It's like traditionalism, but when it comes to the women, it doesn't have to be like that all the time. If that's going to be the case, if they can have 1 foot out and 1 foot in, the whole traditionalism argument kind of goes down the drain.
As well, but in general, I think a woman's job is more of a nurturing, take care type position, maybe. I don't know.
Well, women can choose to do that, but
sure.
Is it fair to hold men to a traditional standard when women are no longer held to a traditional standard?
That's a great question.
Sure, it is. I think so.
But that's what I'm saying.
See, he says it's fair. It really isn't fair to expect that from men if the other side of the equation isn't going to be doing their part to uphold the traditional values.
That a woman can be whatever she wants, but a man is still clearly defined.
Because if you're a man, you're clearly expected to be respectful.
You can be respectful without having to provide a bunch of stuff to the other party. Providing and doing all this stuff, I don't know if that equates with respect. Doing all these things for them is more of a serving behavior. It's like a pedestalization instead of a mutual respect.
Why is it okay for some women to expect men to do traditional manly things like fix stuff and pay bills, but when men expect women to do traditional woman things like cook and clean, it's sexist?
I think there's 100% a double standard in the world these days. I think that women expect so high of like a man and then kind of just almost play the victim a little bit. I love women, like women support women for sure, but I always think that we should never have a double standard.
If chivalry did not exist, how would women define a gentleman or a real man?
Hardworking, passionate.
See, that hardworking and passionate, that can apply to both genders. That's not really how they would define what a man is, because women would say I'm strong and independent and I have my career. Hardworking and passionate kind of line up with that too.
Actions and his word.
Same with the woman, their actions and their word. That's just more of an honest, good person right there.
I don't know if there would be a way to. I don't know if I would be able to define a man if he wasn't chivalrous to me. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think that's the big question. She can't define a man if that backdrop of chivalry isn't there, because chivalry goes into what the traditional standard of masculinity and men look like. So if that's not there, it's kind of the same problem we have on the other side. Like, what is a woman? Like, how do we define a woman's role? And if we're expected to not hold them to the traditional feminine standard, then, how do you define them? And ultimately, it kind of puts it back on men individually to have to define it for themselves. At least that's where we're at now.
I think if you're a very strong and independent woman, it doesn't really matter because they don't expect such things. But
well, see, that's where the confusion comes in, because do they really not expect such things? Typically, the strong and independent women trope, when you see the videos on TikTok, they still expect the men, like, where are all the real men at, quote unquote? And that usually implies men who are willing to do chivalrous actions for them, even though they're strong and independent. And earlier you saw the two girls where they're like, we like it when a man do this, though I can hold my own, though. Like, she put the qualifier statement in there.
if you do rely on that, then I guess I don't know, I guess the world would be a different place.
Why is there so much confusion in our society about what a woman is, but everyone seems to know what a real man is?
I think because the man's role has always been so constant, and within, the new roles and the way that society has changed, women, they can define themselves in different ways, not just, how it used to be in the world where men were the only ones who went to work and the women were the ones to stay home. So I see where that's probably the confusion.
And she's right. Women can define themselves in however they want. Now the question is men are deciding to do the same thing, and it's causing an upset.
How does chivalry work in a lesbian relationship?
That's a great question. I would not know the answer to that.
Do women expect chivalry from other women or only from men?
I don't think they expect it from other women. I wouldn't say.
So would you consider chivalry to be a female privilege?
How do you mean? Like something that we get to the privilege to have or receive?
Do women...
I guess how it would work in a lesbian relationship is, you know, one of the women in there would take on the masculine role, whoever presents as such, and then that would be the chivalrous one. I worked at a child support office for 5 years. I was a child support officer, and I read a lot of divorce orders, and I did read one divorce order that was between lesbians, and they had actually they had adopted a child. So they were a lesbian couple that was married. They adopted a child. I don't think it lasted more than like a year or two after that, and then they were getting split. And there was very clearly the one lesbian woman that was the kind of husband provider, and that's the one that ended up getting screwed over by the family law system and having to pay and everything like that. The other one got custody. It was a huge back and forth. I really spent a lot of time reading that particular judgment just because it was interesting to me. But that's why I'd say it's just one or the other takes on the masculine role.
Expect chivalry from other women or only from men?
I think only from men.
So would you consider chivalry to be a female privilege?
I think so.
Would you consider chivalry to be a female privilege?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What would you think about chivalry if it favored men over women?
As far as women serving men or in the way of chivalry, I feel like it would be a little weird. I don't know. The idea of protecting my better half or my male partner, I guess I could protect him, but it seems like, that would be something that would more so fall in his role, whereas I would have other things that would fall under my role.
I believe that the roles have kind of shifted or reversed, if you will, and I think it is contributed to a lot of things economically. I think that we are no longer living in a society where one household income can sustain a family, and so a lot of the burden to provide has also been put on women at this point, and we're tired. We can't do it all. We got to cook, we got to clean, take care of the house, and make money at the same time. So I think it's just getting a little bit muddy in the waters.
See, and the question is you're working, you're doing all these things. Ostensibly, it means she's also contributing to the household finances and the bills, and a lot of times when women are like, where are the real men at? And they are career minded. What you don't hear from them when they're complaining about dating and all this stuff is, with their newfound rights and freedom, what are they also bringing back to offer the man in a negotiation to marry them? Because it's more often I can't find a man who wants to have a family, provide and do all the man stuff. But they'll never say like, hey, I've been working for this long now. I got a great career. I've saved up a nest egg of, $100,000. Like, I'm just looking for a man who, has something similar, and then we can put it together and put a nice down payment on a house and, split the bills with all this money I'm making. They don't often mention that part, and it's not that I believe those women can be married and find someone. They just have to negotiate it differently and just say, hey, like, here's what I can offer you. But more often than not, it's your money, the man, is our money, and my money is my money. And if that's the case, then it's just not going to work.
Who's more attractive, liberal or conservative men, and why?
In my opinion, a conservative man is more attractive just because, like, I've met a few liberal men and I don't like the way they look at things. I kind of find them to be a little bit out there, and they kind of don't put the woman first, where like conservative men, the ones at least I've met or dated, like, they're going to put you first. They're going to open doors. They're going to take care of you. They know a woman's important in the relationship, where like liberal guys are kind of just, I feel like it can go either way. Like,
so yeah, there's a lot of confusion there. And it's like, okay, the liberal guys are probably telling the women that are, yeah, you're strong and independent. We know you can do a lot of that stuff. If it's coming from a conservative woman like this and they want a more traditional person, I don't fault them for that. But if it's coming from the other side, that's really weird where they wouldn't want a liberal man who expects half the stuff from them. Then it's more of a hypocrisy. The part that gets weird with the conservative women is when they're like, we want a man to take care of me, but I can also do it on my own and all this kind of stuff. Because then they're kind of saying, well, I do like being strong and independent also.
When it comes to relationships, is it better to be wanted or to be needed?
I feel like it should be 50-50.
Which of the following is worse? Feminist women who don't need a man or traditional women who do need a man?
I don't need a man.
I don't need a man, but I mean, at a certain point, I think I will.
Yes.
See, and I'm guessing she's, the more conservative type, but with the laws the way they are, a stay-at-home mom is actually, like, if you're going to end up divorced, which a lot of people do, the stats show that, then that's not the divorce you want to be having. That's going to be a tough on you divorce. You know what I mean? But if the other side says they don't need a man and they're kind of shaming your masculinity in that way, if they're contributing, at least there's that there. And when the divorce happens and they have a job, it's going to be a little smoother. But, the way the laws are now, the traditional woman who wants a man to take care of her is a very dangerous bet.
I don't know.
I'm pretty independent.
Yeah.
See, there you go. There it is. There's the qualifier statement again. I'm pretty independent. I don't need a man, but I will eventually. And that's going to be, at the time where she's just looking for someone more as a utility, more as a means to an end, and to help finance a lot of things. Is that marriage going to last? I mean, I don't know. If she's working and she makes as much as the guy, then maybe it'll last. Or if she's making more, she might be afraid to get divorced. But if she's making way less and she's staying at home at that point and the guy's providing for her, very dangerous.
How is one better than the other when one wants to use men while the other thinks men are useless?
I wouldn't say that a conservative woman wants to use a man. I want to say they want the man to just fulfill his role, not use, because we're not using you. I mean, if you feel that way, you should just move on. And then, but a liberal, like a feminist woman, I would say, like, that's on them. Like, that's just the way they view men. So
I don't really necessarily think it's using. I think the first one is obviously better, but I don't think that we're using them. I just think we're utilizing them just as they're utilizing us.
Utilize.
We're the only ones that can bring children into the world, so obviously they're going to want to find a companion.
What's the difference between using and utilizing?
I don't know. Maybe they mean the same thing. I just feel like when you say using, it kind of just means like there's no benefit for that other person, but when you're utilizing each other, it's just a mutual agreement that one can do things that the other one can't, and you guys just agree that it just makes your life better.
What's the difference between feminist women shaming men for being toxically masculine versus traditional women shaming men for not being masculine enough?
The difference. Okay, I think that the women who shame the men for being overly masculine, I think that they believe that they should be more in charge and that they are more independent and more want to play that role. And I think the opposite is that they expect more from men who don't provide as much.
It's a lot of mixed messaging for men in general, but I'd say that the difference, or the similarity at least, is that it just happens to do with whatever the woman's need or desire is at the time. If a woman's maybe calling out toxic masculinity, it could be when the woman's in an arena where she's trying to compete with the man and she's failing. Then it becomes toxic masculinity. But where the woman wants a man to fulfill her needs and work for her, then the man isn't manly enough. So again, it goes down to self-interest.
What's the difference between feminists labeling anything they don't like as misogyny versus conservatives labeling anything they don't like as immorality?
I don't see a difference.
So aren't they both coming from a self-righteous ideology?
Yes, they are.
Why is one any more shameful than the other?
It isn't.
If conservatives preach that they believe in freedom, why do men have a duty assigned to them in the first place?
I don't know.
Founded.
I don't know.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
I don't feel like there's a double standard there.
Aren't they both coming from a self-righteous ideology?
Yes.
How are the traditional women who shame men for not being masculine enough any better than feminist women?
I don't think they are any better. I think it just depends on what the topic is and what they're upset about or what they're talking about, what the issue is.
Why is it when we talk about women's issues, it's considered the war on women, but when we talk about men's issues, it's considered the war on masculinity?
I feel like everyone kind of has a victim complex now, so they see something like that happening and everyone wants to be the victim. I feel like men are just overlooked in that area, you know?
I think she's right to bring up the word victim. It's kind of an interesting question, sort of tough to think about, but typically, if you go back into chivalry, and not even chivalry proper, but the way it's thrown around or traditional values, it's a lot easier to see a woman as a victim that needs saving, from the masculine hero, and it's very hard to see men as victims themselves. So when it's the war on masculinity instead of the war on men, since people don't really see men as the victim, it's more about masculinity. And the other way, when it's the war on women versus femininity, it's like, they're being very directly attacked or victimized by it. And then also, it's the war on masculinity because right now there's this kind of struggle to define masculinity. There's the traditional conservatives on this side, and they got their view of masculinity. Then there's, your red pillars and all these other guys that are trying to figure out what to do now that the traditional standard has been sidestepped, and they're trying to define masculinity. The people on the other side, on the liberal left side, are trying to define masculinity, and everyone's sort of doing it in a way that serves them. And we're not really looking at the men themselves and what men want. It's just what's better for society, what's better for everybody else.
Why wouldn't we consider it a war on men any more than we consider it a war on femininity?
Because women are fighting so hard right now to be heard, be seen, and
have an actual equal right?
Yeah.
Why are men defined by their role while women are defined by their existence?
See, I feel like men kind of were born into that. Like, they didn't really get an option. Everyone's just like, oh, you're the man, you're the breadwinner,
Who defines that? Who says that that's what the man is supposed to do?
My dad.
And my dad, but he's gone, so I don't know where it came from.
Why are men only honored when they're dying or serving society?
Like I just said, they're overlooked.
I heard this thing, and my boyfriend once told me that for 95% of men or something in the world receive their first bouquet of flowers on their deathbed. So I think that's pretty crazy.
What?
The honor question's interesting. Both sides have their traditional expectations for what's honorable and what's not, if you go back that far. And typically for men, that's what it is. Serving society in that way. I think women were more typically honored and valued by, being good mothers and wives and giving birth to children and taking care of them and all these kinds of things. Nowadays, that's kind of shifted, or the struggle is for them to be honored, or they want to be honored for being strong and independent, whether that involves motherhood or not. For men, honor is one of these very traditional rooted concepts anyway, so I think that just goes back to how people are viewed traditionally.
Why should men be proud of being masculine, aka disposable, or serving women?
I think it's really attractive when a guy wants to take care of everything for you and be that lead role in your life.
Take care of you and help you out instead of have to be asked for.
Is it fair to hold men to a traditional standard when women are no longer held to their traditional standard?
I think that's a matter of opinion. Fairness is perspective as well. I would say, me personally, I don't think it's fair to expect anything of someone that you are not yourself willing to provide as well.
What is a simp?
A simp is defined as a man, typically, who will pretty much do anything for his woman because he loves her so much. But I think it's in a negative light, like maybe he bows down a little too much.
A man will kind of fall on his knees for a woman, kind of beg for her. But that's my interpretation of simp.
Who is the bigger simp, a male feminist or a chivalrous white knight who believes that all women are sacred?
The white knight for sure. A male feminist.
Why?
Because they are doing too much. Because they don't actually think that. They're trying too hard.
Isn't chivalry more likely to come from religious conservatives?
Yes, I think so. But I think that's because they were raised in a mannerly way. And I think that's why they have it more so.
Maybe back in the older times, the chivalrous man wouldn't really be considered a simp because the women on the other side would be behaving in the way that kind of gives back to that chivalrous man, whatever the deal is, so long as he's chivalrous and provides and protects and does all that stuff. I think it's just more about doing something, maybe indirectly to try to get something and then not getting it. Like that's kind of what a simp is, or like a nice guy. But if you're the chivalrous type of guy in nowadays society and you're still doing this stuff and not getting what you're supposed to get in return, then it is kind of simpy in that way. It's just a different thought process that leads to the same result.
So wouldn't that make conservatives the bigger simps?
I mean, probably. But simps aren't necessarily a bad thing.
For her, it's not a bad thing. Insofar as conservatives encourage that kind of behavior and it continues to enable women to take advantage of men, then yeah, they are simps. A lot of times conservatives will encourage traditional ideals, but they won't really do anything substantive to hold the women accountable, So yeah, you can say they're simps.
What's the difference between simping and placing women on a pedestal?
That's a gray area.
I think women should be on a pedestal a little bit.
Oh, here's this guy.
Do we believe in equality where men and women should basically... So we don't believe in equality?
No.
Okay, so then why is our society always talking about equality?
I don't know. I have to ask our society. In our society? No, I think that women should be held differently than men.
So women should be above men and men should be below women?
In some aspects, yeah.
What is the justification for that?
Because I think that a woman is softer and more special as their role as a mother and as a...
But until a woman's having... Not all women choose to have kids, so if a woman
I don't want to sit here and argue with you. Like, if you want to ask me a question, I'll give you my answer, but don't sit here and argue with me about my beliefs.
Man, he got pissed, dude. I'd hate to rag on the guy, but yeah, he's basically being a simp. You know what I mean? And I think when it comes to this cowboy dude, it's just like, okay, if men are supposed to do that, are you holding the women accountable on the other side to whatever they're supposed to be doing on the other side? If you're expected to hold doors and stuff, is it fair for you to ask women to then serve you, in other ways, cooking and cleaning and, I don't know, picking up your dish or something like that? I feel like if you did that, you'd be called a sexist or misogynist or something. So his behavior is just kind of enabling the other side. He says in his society, when he means our society, if you're from this tight-knit group of people and everyone behaves in those traditional ways, then great. But from my experiences, especially working in child support, I just seen so many people cross my desk that were from all walks of life, and the law doesn't care how they live their lives. The law will pretty much punish the provider, chivalrous person in most of those situations. And I think that's what we're dealing with. That's the problem. But I don't know if the cowboy guy sees it that way.
We push conservatism. Are we going to remove equal employment opportunities which prevent men from fulfilling the traditional roles they're advocating for?
No, I would hope not.
How are men supposed to be providers when they now have to compete in a job market that favors women?
That's fair. I don't really know how to answer that one. It's pretty tough because women expect a lot from their partners, but then it's hard because in a society there are women who do want to be the stay-at-home moms and stuff like that, and then there are the super independents. So how do you create jobs for both to supply where men still get them? It's hard. You can't please everybody.
See, she's right. I mean, it's a fair question. It really is a fair question, and it's cowboy guy would encourage everybody to be the provider, and you're supposed to do that, but at the same time, are you going to lobby for men to have priority in these jobs over women. And we're kind of living in a society where it's almost the opposite. So that changes what wages look like. That changes how much it takes to be able to provide those things for women if that is what they want. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier, that, I think women and modern women can figure out how to get married, but they have to come to the negotiating table with more than just, I expect you to do everything for me. It has to be, hey, listen, I've been working hard. I've been saving. I have this money ready to go. I'm willing to put half in on the down payment of the house. I'm willing to contribute financially. I think a lot of women, it's like they want men to protect and provide, but I think the providing part here is, especially when you think about jobs, is the part that men shouldn't be expected to do as much anymore, because women can provide for themselves and at least provide something to a relationship or a household. Men, rightly so, probably should still be expected to provide protection, but the protect and provide part is where there's a huge gray area.
I mean, it's equal opportunities now for sure compared to what it was, but there's still a role that men are expected to fill in the job force, all of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are more women stepping out and doing men's jobs, men's jobs.
If women are independent and can do it on their own, why do they still want a man to take care of them?
Because it still feels nice to feel like a feminine girl, be protected, be taken care of.
It just feels good. Like, you want someone there, like, to protect you, and like to, like, even though, like, I'm very independent, like,
See, there it is. There's the qualifier statement. See, that's what I was talking about earlier. Most of the women that were interviewed, asked that question, they all said that, like, oh, it feels good, but I am very independent. And this is where the whole undercover feminist thing comes in, because if they're not like a truly organic traditional woman, like this is more cosplay than it is anything. Like, this isn't our environment, our society, the laws, the way things work does not cultivate real traditional people. It cultivates modern people. And when people purport to be traditional, what they're really doing is they're just cosplaying as a traditional person. And the evidence of that is her statements here and the statements of the other women that, like, it feels good, this is what we want, but I can do all these things by myself. This is what draws out the undercover feminism in them. So if you take that deal and you marry this person on a long enough timeline, that inner sort of independence or feminist is going to show itself, and it's probably going to lead to the demise of the marriage and you having to, give up a lot of things financially.
I want a man that I know that will get in front of a train for me. Like, I can defend myself, but
if you could please just get in front of a train for me, that would be really attractive.
Do women want to be independent while also being provided for? And if so, who's more delusional in their wants?
I believe yes, and probably the women are a little delusional, but that's just part of our charm, our spark, our flavor.
I'm delusional. I'm the definition of delusion.
Aren't both options available only to women but not men?
Yes.
Isn't that a double standard?
I mean, I like to say no. I think that's just how it kind of goes.
If conservatives hate feminism, why don't they advocate for men's rights?
I feel like we take men for granted, like, a little bit, Mm-hmm. They do a lot for us, and I mean, I am independent, so I like to do all that myself, but...
Oh, there we go. There's the qualifier statement again. I'm independent, and I like to do all that stuff for myself.
But when we have the
men
opportunity
do play a key
and
part.
do it, like...
Yeah, men play a key part in a woman's life, whether they know it or not.
Yeah.
And what's the key part? Is the key part just being used by them? You know what I mean? See, that qualifier statement of them saying, but we're also independent, is the part that really causes a lot of issues here. I like this question, though, about why don't the conservatives do more for men's rights? And that's kind of been my issue, especially with these characters like Matt Walsh and all these kinds of folks. Are they fighting to help, men get custody of their children? Are they helping to stop paternity fraud? Are they helping to do some kind of overhaul to incentivize men to want to marry? So that there can be protections for both parties. Personally, I think custody should be taxpayer funded. Why? Because child support's taxpayer funded. typically when a man is going through a divorce, he has to pay so much for an attorney. He's fighting a divorce case. He's fighting a child support case, which usually happens, alongside of all that. And then if he wants custody, he has to fight for custody, and that's all more money. And if he's already paying child support, because the child support office is quick, they'll have you paying child support way before your divorce is ever finalized. There's very little money left over to then go in and ask, for private custody action from the court. So it should be taxpayer funded, because if we cared about fathers having relationships with their children, then we should at least give them a pathway to get that, in a way that they don't have to choose between, do I pay child support this month or do I try to hire an attorney to help me with custody?
Who shames male sexuality more? Feminists for labeling men as sexual predators, or religious conservatives for shaming sex outside marriage?
I think religious women shaming sex outside of marriage.
If men want purity, wouldn't that mean men have to wait until marriage? And haven't we established men shouldn't be getting married under the current laws?
I think men should be getting married under the current laws, but...
Have you seen the divorce rate?
It's high, but I think that's why you should wait until marriage and wait until you find the right one to marry.
You're not going to...
See, that's what one of my favorite content creators is, Coach Greg Adams, and he calls that the hope strategy. So kind of just hoping, and it's all about selection. Men hear that a lot. Like, when it goes wrong, it's either it was your fault or you just didn't choose the right one. And if you would have just chose the right one. But then we have this whole problem of undercover feminists, people who are cosplaying as the right one. And it's just like, you know what I mean? It's just, you kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't in that scenario.
Have to worry about divorce. You're not going to have to worry about custody. Of course, you can never predict divorce and whether it's going to happen or not. But I do feel like with prayer and guidance, you will be able to find someone who you won't have to worry about those things with.
Isn't that almost the hope and faith strategy?
There you go.
Absolutely. God is good.
Why is everyone pushing for traditional gender roles in marriage without first changing the laws? Have you seen the divorce rate?
Actually, Oklahoma has the highest divorce rate.
My mom probably accounts for 4 of them.
That's so funny.
If she ever sees this, I'm going to get my butt whooped.
That was pretty funny. I mean, listen, I've never been to Oklahoma. I'm assuming it's pretty conservative, traditional. I don't know if that's true about them having the highest divorce rate. I'd like to think that's more of like the liberal sort of coastal cities, like California and New York and these kinds of places. But her saying her mom accounts for like 4 divorces, like if you've been divorced twice at least, I'd say it's probably time to just pack it up and maybe don't go for the paperwork marriage again, But that's funny. Even in Oklahoma, women out there are getting divorced 4 times.
Would you get married if it was just a religious ceremony with no government documents?
Yes, probably will.
I would too.
Yeah, I think I would. Because it's a commitment, and it's one of the hardest commitments you'll make, but it's one of the most rewarding commitments you'll make.
I got to give them credit for that. Okay, if they're going to be like, yeah, I would not sign the paperwork because this is how much marriage means to me, I still got to give them credit for that, because then that's them really saying, hey, like, yeah, we do want this with you. We're not after your money and all these kinds of things. So, hey, good for them.
Does the fact that the church won't marry you without a government license violate the separation of church and state?
No, because depending on the state, if you're in a relationship living together in the same household for over 5 years, you're considered married.
That's called common law.
Yes.
The vast majority of states are not common law states, but that's a strange question, especially for, obviously the majority, I think religion here is Christianity, and that's what a lot of the laws are kind of rooted in. And it is strange that the church typically won't issue a marriage without the state license or the state contract basically signed. And that is a problem for them specifically. But typically, I think in Christianity, you can only be married to one person, right? And it's like the church doesn't want to marry someone who might already be married to someone else, because then they would be sort of sanctioning them living in sin together. If they rely on the marriage sort of database to issue a marriage license, then they're back checking to see is either of these people married to somebody else somewhere else in the country or wherever. So then it at least determines that, okay, these two people aren't married, we can marry them. But at the same time, it does seem a little bit too much like government's involved there and kind of has a little bit of a stranglehold on that.
You know, that's a great question, and I would have to refer to the Bible for that answer. But I do know that there is a little bit of controversy surrounding that.
Why would conservatives who say they want smaller government want the government involved in your love life to begin with?
That's also a great question. I think that there was probably some instances at one time where the government felt that they needed to step in for some reason, and it's just kind of stuck. And I think a lot of traditions happen that way. But yeah, that's a great question.
See, that's also a very conflicting thing. My boyfriend and I have always said that we'd want to get married in a church, but at the same time, the government involves themselves in literally everything else, so why would we want them to be involved in that? So.
That's kind of interesting that her and her boyfriend had that conversation already. Interesting. The boyfriend must be watching some of these YouTube videos.
So that's also another conflicting topic.
If conservatives hate feminism, why don't they advocate for men's rights?
That's a good question. You would have to ask a conservative.
I don't know. I think the men should be in charge, should be the leader, but I don't think that gives women no rights.
Don't they care more about masculinity, which is about servitude?
Yes.
I think mixing masculinity and the concept of servitude is a dangerous area because they are not the same, and you don't automatically get one with the other.
I think it's okay to serve your partner, and I think traditionally partners served each other, and the laws were constructed in such a way that helped to reinforce that. But if it's only going to be one way and the laws only kind of encourage that one way, then it's just not going to work.
So then aren't we further promoting the inequality between men and women?
Well, we are, but I don't think I think we kind of push it under the rug.
I think that it's a slippery slope, and we all got to just come together and have a good, honest conversation.
Do you believe that women were oppressed back when they were expected to be traditional, back before feminism?
I do. I think that feminism really did have a good, the intentions were good. I just think the deliverance was not. In the past, I do think that there was some inequality, but I believe now we've pretty much gotten to an even field.
You know, that's an interesting question, and I wonder how many traditionally conservative women believe that. Because if they believe that back in those like most traditional of times women were oppressed, then I don't really believe they can purport to be traditional now, because that kind of goes into the Undercover Feminist title here of the video.
So how are men not oppressed by holding them to a traditional standard today?
Because at the end of the day, our sexes are different. Men are men and women are women. And by God, we were designed to do different tasks as each other's helpmates.
I think men find gratitude in serving women. I know my fiance does. He loves to do the traditional manly things. So I don't think it's oppressing to do things that we were naturally born to do.
I wish she would say, I also find gratitude in serving my husband.
What's the difference between feminist women shaming men for being men and traditional women shaming men for not being real men?
Well, being a real man is having that kind heart, and you gotta just be able to be kind but carry out what is needed to be done.
Wouldn't the same rules apply for women?
Yeah.
So then why would men be held to a traditional standard, but a woman...
Times are changing, baby.
Well, I mean, isn't that like a...
That's true. Yeah, double standard, I guess.
Right. Well, why should men accept those terms?
That's a good, fair point.
It is a fair point, you know, and again, men have dealt with this for long enough to see that if they adhere to the cowboy strategy over here, the cowboy simp guy, that they're going to shoot themselves in their own foot. And enough people have been through the system to where they're tired of that. You know, I do believe that the laws are antiquated and they are in serious need of an overhaul. And I think that men are frustrated, but they just don't really know what to ask for. You know, like in California, for instance, if you're married and a child's born within the marriage and you guys are getting divorced and the kid's like 3 years old now, if you find out the kid's not yours, you know, maybe mom cheated, the courts are going to say, nope, you have to stay in the child's life and you have to provide for that child. Even if you don't have custody, you still have to pay. And I think that is a law that is kind of based in this chivalrous attitude of, well, you're a man and this is, you just got to deal with it. And we don't really care what you want. But it should be updated to, hey, if you find this out, you should have first right to say, I'm taking away my paternity status. Have her go find who the actual man is and make that guy responsible. To me, that's fair. But we don't live in that society, and a woman can full on cheat on a man, make his kid not his, and have absolutely no repercussions for that. And that's us serving women in that way. That's the laws enabling women. And then I mentioned custody earlier. I think custody should be taxpayer funded. You know, I think child support and spousal support should have caps. You know, like you shouldn't see these egregious $20,000 a month orders that some of these people have to pay. And I think no fault divorce can exist, but I think if someone wants to get a divorce and one party hasn't been injured, there wasn't abuse, that the person who wants the no fault divorce, that wants out of the contract, has to forfeit, you know, their rights on the marital assets. So it's like, you can leave if you want, but if the other person hasn't done anything bad, whether that's the man or the woman, then you're forfeiting your claim on the house. You're forfeiting your dibs on custody. You're forfeiting the alimony because you want to leave for whatever reason. And I think these are all changes we can make, we can lobby for, we can ask for, that would have a lot of impact, that would help solve a lot of these problems, or at least make the game more fair. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment down below, and we'll see you on the next one.